Petey is my favorite book. Petey is by Ben Mikaelsen. The story of a handicapped person who has cerebral palsy. He was born in the 30s when they didn't know what cerebral palsy was. So in effect, he was put in different institutions and spent his whole life as a patient in different institutions. I'm going to read chapter 15 from Petey, because that's when Petey's life changes. He meets a young boy by the name of Trevor Ladd, who's an 8th grader. Let's pick it up from there. Takes place in Bozeman, Montana in the spring. Trevor Ladd kicked at the warm, wet spring snow as he walked home from school. Students were shouting and laughing, throwing slushy snowballs. The air held a carnival atmosphere. Slowly at first, then more loudly, one disturbing sound clashed with all the rest. A strange, grunting squeal pried at the air. Trevor crossed the street to investigate the sound. As he came around the corner by the nursing home, he saw 3 8th grade boys from his class at school hiding behind a big pine tree. He recognized the school bullies: Kenny, the stocky one; Bud, the kid who always had a smirk on his face; and a tall one named String. And they were lobbing snowballs over the tree onto the nursing home lawn. Their target was a patient stretched out on a reclining wheelchair. A white sheet covered his legs. Wet slush drenched the old man. And each time a snowball hit him with a thud, the patient flailed his shriveled, claw-like arms and screeched, his eyes pinched closed with pain. "Hey, quit that, you guys!" Trevor yelled, breaking into a run, and in seconds, he stood like a sentry beside the deformed man. "Great! Now we've got 2 targets!" Kenny laughed, and he flung the next snowball hard, hitting Trevor in the neck. "Knock it off, you guys!" "Yeah, I'll knock your head off!" cackled String, unleashing a bullet that exploded against the wheelchair. "You're a dead man!" Trevor stood his ground, a human shield. Again and again, snowballs pelted him hard, and with snowballs raining in from 3 different directions, Trevor didn't see the hard-packed missile before it struck his face. Sharp pain pierced his eyes. He bent over. "Help!" Trevor screamed at the top of his voice. "Somebody help me!" Then a fresh fusillade of snowballs rocketed in, and Trevor laid himself over the old man and kept yelling. Suddenly the snowballs ceased. Trevor glanced up to see the 3 boys running down the street, laughing. "What's going on out here?" called a woman's voice. Barely able to see with his eye, Trevor saw a tall nurse rushing around across the lawn toward them. She said, "Get away from Petey," shoving Trevor away from the wheelchair, and she brushed wet globs of snow off the patient. The patient just grunted, "Oh! Oh!" Trevor covered his watering eyes and said, "Look, some guys were throwing snowballs at this old man." "What guys?" the nurse asked sharply, fussing over the old man. Trevor pointed up the street. "Well, they're gone now." "And what's wrong with your eye?" I got hit," Trevor said, squinting. The nurse, about the same age as Trevor's mom, turned to the man in the wheelchair and said, "Was somebody throwing snowballs at you, Petey?" "Aye! Aye!" he squawked. "Did this boy throw them?" "Oh! Oh!" the shivering patient grunted, fear still wild in his eyes. "All right, let's get you inside, Petey," She pointed to Trevor. You come too. What's your name? Trevor, lad. Well, what were you doing out here? I was just walking home from school. I heard this squealing sound, and then I saw 3 boys throwing snowballs at this guy. Did you recognize the boys? No, Trevor said, lying. The 3 bullies had killed somebody who squealed on them. You go to school here in Bozeman, Montana, and you didn't recognize the boys? We just moved to town, Trevor said. They had just moved before Christmas. The nurse eyed him skeptically, taking a pen and a notepad from her pocket. All right, I want your name and your phone number. Trevor gave the information. Then he looked toward the deformed patient. He said, look, if you don't believe me, ask him. And after a pause, he added, if you can. Oh, I can. And I will. Now, if you'll excuse me, I need to get Petey into something dry and warm. Things like this could kill an older person. He spoke accusingly. As Trevor left, he glanced around. There was a faint smell, rotten smell. Patients sat everywhere, slumped in their chairs. Some stared at the ceiling. Others shook their heads and hands uncontrollably. Still others drooled. The place was a nut house of crazy old people, and Trevor couldn't leave fast enough. When Trevor arrived home, his mom and dad were still working. They were always working, it seemed. Trevor saw the postman more often than his parents. Today, though, Trevor was glad they weren't home. I mean, how could he explain what had happened without getting into more trouble? I mean, his parents might call the nursing home, or worse, maybe the bully's parents. Later that evening, Trevor couldn't hide his swollen eye. His mother asked him at supper, what in the world happened to you? I got hit by a snowball, Trevor said weakly. You know, you could lose an eye there throwing snowballs, his father said severely. Yes, Dad, Trevor mumbled, thinking about that madhouse of crazy people he had seen that afternoon. Dozens of times he had walked past that nursing home without imagining the loony bin that existed inside. It was like an insane asylum. At school the next day, Trevor tried to avoid the bullies, but Kenny cornered him in the hallway, and he shoved him hard against the lockers. We're going to get you, boy, he growled, jabbing Trevor with a finger. When school let out, Trevor avoided the bullies and the nursing home by several blocks. He didn't like old people much. Most were weird. Not as weird, however, as the ones he'd seen yesterday. Well, throwing his jacket on the table when he got home, he opened the refrigerator in search of a snack, and as he ate a sandwich, he listened to the messages on the answering machine. And all the messages were for his parents, except for one, from the Bozeman nursing home. The nurse, Sissy Michael, had called, wanting to talk to him again. And after making sure to erase the message, Trevor hesitantly returned the call, and maybe the nurse still thought he had hurt the old man. Bozeman nursing home, answered the woman's voice. Hi, is Sissy Michael there? This is Trevor Ladd. Yes, this is Sissy. Oh, thank you for calling back. First, let me apologize for how I treated you yesterday. After talking to Peter, it appears you did protect him. It's no big deal, Trevor said, wishing the whole thing would just go away. Oh, it is a big deal, Sissy said. That's why I called. Yesterday, Petey was too cold and scared to thank you. He asked if you would stop by. That's okay. Just tell him I'm glad he's okay. Sissy's voice grew more serious. Look, I'm sure this place is probably frightening if you've never been in a nursing home before, but it really would mean the world to Petey if he could say thanks in person. Will you stop by? Yeah, I suppose so. Before Trevor could think of another excuse, Sissy hung up. Trevor hit his forehead with his palm, suddenly afraid. Why had he agreed to go back inside that crazy place? At supper that night, Trevor's mom said, I called home earlier and listened to the phone messages on the machine. What was that call for you from the nursing home? Trevor caught his breath, then shrugged. Yeah, well, some guys were throwing snowballs at an old man, and they thought I might have been one of the guys. Trevor's dad eyed him, said, well, were you? Yeah, right. You think I'd throw snowballs at an old person? Trevor stomped out the front door. He might as well go to the nursing home and get this over with. Where are you going? To throw snowballs at old men, Trevor said. Oh, this had gotten too weird for him. I mean, being accused of throwing snowballs couldn't have been any worse than visiting this nut house to speak to some deformed old geezer. As Trevor approached the brick building, there was an old man kneeling beside a flower bed. He looked up and waved. Hi! The guy had long, shiny silver hair, baggy overalls. He called out, Hey, you want to help me plant? I'm busy, Trevor said politely, glancing at the old man's work in the fresh soil. What are you planting? Cigarette butts, came the answer. Sure enough, the man had a dozen little holes dug, and in each one he had carefully placed a cigarette butt. What do you think? He asked, proudly. Trevor ignored the question and rushed inside the building. The guy was nuts. The whole place was full of crazy people. He found Sissy Michael as quickly as he could. Hi, Trevor. I'll be right with you. Her smile was warm. I can come back later to see the patient, Trevor thought, searching for any excuse just to get out of the place. No. I'll just be a minute. He didn't have to wait long. Follow me, she said, leading Trevor to the end of a long hallway, down 2 flights of stairs. And as she walked, she spoke. The people you see at this nursing home are residents, not patients. Patients are in hospitals. Some of these residents have the most incredible backgrounds. One lady was thrown off a covered wagon at the turn of the century simply because she was mentally retarded. Are you kidding? No. And Petey Corbin, the guy you helped yesterday, he was born with cerebral palsy, but misdiagnosed as a baby. Most of his life, people have treated him like an idiot. What's cerebral palsy? It's a nervous system disorder. Petey is mentally sharp, but his mind is locked inside a defective body. He's a very special person. What's so special about him? Jessie smiled. His incredible appreciation for life, even though life hasn't always been so good to him. And as they walked, Sissy kept stopping to visit with the residents. She didn't treat people like they were nuts. She would say things to them like, Don't worry, Herman. The Russians won't bomb this place. Oh, yes, Mabel. This is Wednesday. Tomorrow you play bingo, remember? One skinny and wrinkled woman in a yellow baggy dress teetered along, her arm reaching for help. Right down there, Elizabeth. Your room is just down the hall. Here, wait a minute. We'll help you. Trevor, maybe you could help hold her arm so she doesn't fall. That's Elizabeth. Trevor hesitated. Just touching the gnarled old lady's frail arm might break it. She looked like a dried-up old weed. Nervously, as if handling fragile glass, Trevor held the bony appendage, turning to see if anybody was watching him. What if she fell? Luckily, he didn't have to find out. And after delivering Elizabeth to her room safely, Sissy stopped Trevor outside the doorway at the end of the hallway, and she spoke in a hushed voice. Trevor, you must remember this about Petey. He is not mentally retarded. Given a different body, he'd be standing and talking to us right now. So, what's the big deal with my visit? Look, 13 years ago, they transferred Petey here from Warm Springs State Hospital. Warm Springs used to be an insane asylum. You mean this guy grew up in an insane asylum? Yes, I'm afraid so. Yet, Petey has a capacity for happiness that nobody completely understands. Since coming here, though, he hasn't allowed himself to make any close friends. And this morning, when he made it clear he wanted to see you, it was the first time I've ever seen him reach out to anyone. What you did yesterday meant a great deal to him. Trevor nodded, wiping his sweaty hands against his pants. Why was he so scared? He was just meeting an old man. No big deal. Entering Petey Corbin's small room, Trevor held his breath. Reclining backward, Petey looked ready to wheel into an operating room. The twisted shapes under his cover sheet made Trevor cringe. What kind of legs could form such shapes? Petey's thin arms bent awkwardly at the elbow, resting beside him with limp bird claw hands. His tongue coiled strangely in his open mouth, and his head hunched sideways. He had a short gray beard and a mustache, and a long scar angled across his right cheek. Had somebody actually attacked this guy? Petey, Sissy said warmly, this is Trevor Ladd. You two met yesterday? Trevor hesitated, not knowing if he should shake Petey's lifeless hand. Awkwardly, he just waved at him and stammered, hello, Petey. Glad to meet you. Petey looked up curiously. Ow! Trevor looked to Sissy for help. She said, Petey just said hello. Hello, Petey. Sissy has told me all about you. Petey looked over at Sissy. Why? Why? Sissy smiled. Tell Petey what I've told you. Trevor felt two penetrating eyes settle on him and trap him like prey. Petey's body might have been useless, but his eyes sure weren't. Standing motionless, Trevor sensed he should never lie to this man. Yeah, well, he stammered. Sissy said that you were raised in an insane asylum and that you can understand everything I say, huh? Petey nodded. Then he noticed Trevor's swollen eye. He jutted out his chin in concern. Oh, eh? He asked if you're okay. Oh, yeah, it's nothing. He said, thank you. Yeah, it's, no big deal. And for several awkward moments, Petey and Trevor just stared at each other. Finally, fingering a shirt button, he said, look, I better go. Again, Petey gripped Trevor with that stare. He said, you, me? Trevor looked at Sissy again for help. He wants to know if you'll visit him. Trevor squirmed and said, maybe, knowing there was no way he could ever come back here. Trevor wanted out from in front of Petey's wheelchair, out from this nursing home and the crazy people living here. Place gave him the creeps. Petey, I gotta go, he stammered. It was nice meeting you. Disappointment showed clearly in Petey's eyes. It was obvious he knew Trevor had lied. He motioned with his chin. Goodbye. His goodbye seemed a command. And as they walked back upstairs, Trevor said quietly to Sissy, think he was mad at me. Trevor, Petey has no family. He's scared to make new friends. So, Trevor said, knowing all too well how that felt. Every time his family moved, he felt like an outsider again. And after leaving that last bunch of friends, he promised himself never to make the effort again. Sissy spoke deliberately. She said, look, today Petey took a huge gamble and he reached out to someone new. He failed. Trevor stumbled with his words. No, he didn't fail. It's just that, geez, all I did was try to stop some guys from throwing snowballs at him. It's no big deal. Sissy smiled gently. Oh, it's a big deal for a helpless person. Helpless my foot. Trevor thought, with those eyes, he could kill a crow at 100 yards just by staring at him. Look, will you be back? Sissy asked, following Trevor to the door. Petey loves going on walks, but usually we don't have enough staff to get him out. And, well, you never know. You might learn something from Petey. Maybe, Trevor said, knowing it would sound bad if he came out and just said no. Look, don't say maybe if you don't mean it, Sissy said firmly. Trevor took an angry breath. Okay, I'm not coming back. Now, are you happy? Trevor goes back every day. He takes Petey for walks. Takes Petey to a shopping mall. Petey has never been in the store before in his life. Takes him fishing. Petey has never fished. When they do fish, Petey says, put it back, put it back. Trevor Ladd becomes his friend. And Trevor changes Petey's life. And Petey changes Trevor's life. And by reading this book, it just might change your life too. If you like what we're doing, please subscribe. You just might find a very special book that'll change your whole life. Thank you. Bye-bye.